a proposal. But to me, no, they are not proposing. But they are seeking to impose, often against the very wishes of the people they claim to represent. So for too long, the democratic world has talked about this kind of problem, and yet still continues to do so. We must now move beyond the world, beyond that, because we know what the challenges are, and we know who our challengers are as well. Now is the time to act, because the other side is acting as Russia's action in Europe has made all too clear. We must elaborate strategies and be as inclusive as possible while we do so. We must be imaginative and not allow self-imposed constraints or fears to hamper our efforts to counter the authoritarian revisionism. So this does not mean that we must abandon our democratic ideals or rule of law. Absolutely not. But we must also realize that stagnancy, hesitancy, and a lack of vision are a form of weakness that the autocrats will not hesitate to exploit. So we understand it is not by any accident that we are gathered here in Taiwan today to discuss these important issues. As a model of democracy in Asia, we all understand Taiwan is on the front lines of that kind of clash of ideologies. It is the first bridge in China's attempts to reorganize the regional order and rewrite the rules of the game in a way that benefits power and nothing else. Consequently, Taiwan can be, and in fact is, part of the solution, which is a piece in the puzzle. So let us therefore use this opportunity to come together and give serious consideration to the best tactics and strategies by which we can push back against authoritarianism in all its forms, from its corrosive gray zone activities to the rewriting of the map by military aggression. So it is my fondest hope that this forum can serve as a starting point, I say as a starting point for new ideas, and more importantly, for concerted action. For concerted action. So again, today, I thank you all for being with us. Again, thank you very much.
Thanks to the opening statement from Chairman Chen. Please be seated. And at this time, it's also our great privilege and distinct honor to have Her Excellency, Madam President Tsai Ing-wen, to address for the opening ceremony. Now, please join me in welcoming Her Excellency, Madam President Tsai.
Prospect Foundation Chairman Mark Tentangsan, former President of Estonia Thomas Hendrik Ilves, former Foreign and Defense Minister of Japan Kono Taro, former U.S. Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano, Foreign Minister Joseph Wu, Prospect Foundation President Lai Yizhong, distinguished officials and guests joining us from around the world, good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you to this year's Katagalan Forum. I want to especially thank those who have traveled from abroad to be here today, as well as those who are joining us virtually across time zones. For 6 years now, the Katagalan Forum has provided officials and experts in the Indo-Pacific and around the world with a unique opportunity to share views on important regional security issues. I'm hopeful that after more than 2 years fighting COVID-19, we will soon be able to welcome all of you to Taiwan so you can experience our vibrant democracy for yourselves. I want to take this opportunity to pay tribute to the late former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo of Japan. With his tragic passing, Japan lost a great leader. Taiwan lost a dear friend and ally, and the world lost a statesman of great vision. In developing the Quad and the concept of a free and open Indo-Pacific, the former Prime Minister laid the foundation for stronger regional partnership. Thanks to him, we are better placed to uphold the democratic, rules-based order that will ensure our region's stability and prosperity. Our democratic partnerships have never been more important as our shared values and institutions face unprecedented challenges. The COVID-19 pandemic has heightened these challenges while exposing the stark contrast between authoritarian and democratic systems. Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine has shown us that authoritarian regimes will not hesitate to violate the sovereignty of other states. These regimes pose increasing threats to international peace and security, requiring us to adopt a coordinated response. Here in the Indo-Pacific, authoritarian actors threaten to upend the regional balance. Their gray zone tactics seek to weaken international law and norms. Their diplomacy works to infiltrate democratic institutions and international organizations, undermining the sovereignty of other countries. And their violent crackdowns have exposed systemic human rights abuses. Taiwan's geostrategic position on the front lines of this authoritarian expansion makes us a crucial stronghold for democracy. With decades of experience, Taiwan can play a key role in alliances to counter authoritarian intrusion. We are glad to see more democracies worldwide acknowledge the stakes involved in the Indo-Pacific. In the past year, we saw the founding of AUKUS, as well as new initiatives by the EU and Quad to expand regional engagement. Just last month, Japan, Korea, Australia, and New Zealand attended a Nato Summit for the first time. That summit concluded with a statement addressing the challenges posed by China. And leaders at the G7 meetings last month also underscored the importance of peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. As an integral democratic partner in the Indo-Pacific, Taiwan has been taking measures to upgrade our security. We have set up new facilities to advance domestic development of naval vessels. We have also taken steps to bolster our reserve forces. and we have made substantial investments to enhance our asymmetric warfare capabilities. Together, these efforts are accelerating our progress towards self-sufficiency in national defense. I want to make clear that the Taiwanese people are committed to defending our country, upholding our democratic way of life, and maintaining regional security and stability. Taiwan is not only key to regional and global security, but is also an indispensable member of the international community. Despite facing many obstacles to our international participation, we continue to engage meaningfully with friends around the world. Through the Global Cooperation and Training Framework, that is GCTF, Taiwan has conducted exchanges with more than 100 countries on cybersecurity, women's empowerment, humanitarian assistance, and other pressing issues. Closer to home, our New South-South policy has helped facilitate increased investment and people-to-people exchanges between Taiwan and our regional partners. With the launch of the U.S.-Taiwan Initiative on 21st Century Trade last month, we are deepening trade ties with the United States. And Taiwan and the EU are aligning our policy goals, deepening the connectivities that help our mutual investment to reach record highs this past year. Our world-leading semiconductor industry is also advancing our global economic cooperation. While Taiwan's top chip makers expand their reach, our government is broadening international collaboration and stepping up R&D and training to maintain our competitive edge in this critical sector. Taiwan can and is playing a major role in ensuring secure global supply chains. Alongside our efforts to strengthen democratic unity, supply chain cooperation can be another important tool to curb authoritarian influence. Despite constant threats to our democratic values and way of life, we never give up on our commitment to democracy, freedom, and human rights. We're deeply grateful to all our like-minded partners who continue to stand with us in protecting our shared values and maintaining peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. As long as we remain united, we can stem authoritarian expansion and allow democracy to flourish. By joining together here to share ideas and build common purpose, we honor the legacy of those who strove for a more free and peaceful world. Let us stand up for our values so that future generations can enjoy the hard-earned democratic freedoms passed down to us. I thank you all for your contributions to this dialogue and wish you a productive and enjoyable forum. Thank you.
Thanks to Her Excellency, Madam President Tsai. In following session, we'll have another distinguished guest from the Republic of Kosovo, former President Birger Patuli, to deliver his congratulatory message.
Dear President Tsai, dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, it's so great pleasure for me to speak today at the opening of this very important forum, an important venue for sure for discussing regional and international security issues that are concerned and pressing for the democratic world. In the global strategic stage, we have transited from unipolar moments. We are going past the bipolar world and are emerging into a multipolar world. In that multipolar world, Asia will be a major tentpole, and so will, I hope, one day Europe as well. The question then is what could be possible derived out fulfillment of that potential. I will focus on three areas. First, we are in the middle of fundamental debate about the future and direction of our world. As President Biden has argued, today the primary challenge international politics is ideological democracy versus autocracy. We are what is described as the global struggle between autocratic regime on freely elected governments. Kosovo, Taiwan, and all small democracies around the world can make meaningful commitments toward the objectives of President Biden and objectives of the United States, of countering authoritarianism, fighting against corruption, and advancing respect for human rights at home and abroad. The war in Ukraine has shown that we need more and more meaningful and clear democratic solidarity if we want to maintain the rule-based and order and democratic nature. Second, if we are able to maintain a rule-based international order and rule that recognize the diversity and wisdom of the ages from Asia and makes the necessary adjustment to the past World War II international institutions like the United Nations, etc. Another point on the rules-based international order has been highlighted by the invasion of Ukraine. If we continue to go back to a pre-World War means of engaging other countries, and if we continue to believe that might is right, and that big countries get to redraw boundaries, setting historical errors and crazy decisions, then all bets are off. We do need a universally accepted rule-based world order in which all of us have a say, all of us, big or small, wealthy or not so wealthy, are equal, and that those superpowers will feel and will assess that it is in their own enlightened self-interest to restrain themselves and act in accordance with international law. The third prerequisite for us to fulfill our potential is in trade and investments. I am making the argument for greater economic integration between democracies so that our free market economy can develop further and respond to the needs of our people. So we don't leave gray zones that enter autocratic actors and use the economic sphere to influence the political direction of democracies. We all know about digitalization. We know that artificial intelligence is undergoing a revolution. We know that there are whole new professions being created. My point is the digital revolution is in fact a complete revamp of the means of production and of wealth generation for the future. This is another area which Taiwan has a natural lead. And if we can complement Taiwan's capability and the latent nascent abilities and markets in Kosovo and Western Balkans, then we can remark not just the next 2 decades, but I hope at least the next half century and behind. That's why I invite Taiwanese companies to come to Kosovo and use Kosovo as a hub for Western Balkans on the European Union. Use its youth, potential, and geography to expand further. Let me conclude by saying again that the relationship between democracies is not something new. It has gone on for millennia. I hope to see more exchange between Kosovo and Taiwan, so long as we keep a peaceful and stable world based on international law so long as we open the arterial connection between our countries, and as long as we train our youth peoples to harness the opportunities that the digital revolution provides us, we have a great future ahead of us. Thank you very much.
Thanks to His Excellency Mr. President Patsuli. In following agenda, to start our meeting with keynote speech, it's our great honor to have Kono Taro-san, who is former Minister for Foreign Affairs and Minister of Defense, and also the member House of Representatives, Japan. But before we bring him to you, I would like to invite our moderator, Deputy Minister, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of China, Taiwan, Tian Zhongguang, to introduce the keynote speaker and the topic. Now, please join me once again in welcoming Deputy Minister Tian Zhongguang.
Well, thank you very much. Our host, Dr. Mark Cheng of Prospect Foundation, the invited foreign dignitaries, ambassadors and representatives of diplomatic corps, invited guests, friends online, and the press. Very good morning to you all. It is indeed my personal great honor and privilege to introduce the opening keynote speaker for this year's Kaidakalan Forum, the Honorable Kono Taro, former Minister for Foreign Affairs and Minister of Defense of Japan. Mr. Kono had planned to pay the second visit to Taiwan today. However, he contracted COVID-19 2 weeks ago. Although he has a very mild symptoms, virtual visit is more suitable consideration the advice given by the doctor. I wish Mr. Kono a speedy recovery. Taiwan always welcomes you to visit at any time. Before I introduce Mr. Kono, on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I would like to express our profound sadness and deepest sympathies on the passing of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The democracy community has lost a great leader, and Taiwan has lost a true friend. However, I'm certain that Taiwan and Japan will continue to deepen exchanges and cooperations going forward. Mr. Kono's address at the forum is a symbol of the enduring friendship between Taiwan and Japan. Mr. Kono graduated from Georgetown University with a bachelor degree in 1985, before working in Fuji Xerox and Nippon Tashi for several years. He first entered the Diet at the age of 33, winning a seat in the 41st House of Representatives election. Since then, he has been re-elected 8 times in a row. Mr. Kono served in the several prominent positions, including Foreign Minister, Defense Minister, Minister in charge of COVID vaccine rollout, Minister for Administrative Reform, and Minister for Regulatory Reform. His recent appointment as a chairperson for public relations at the Liberal Democratic Party draws on his high profile and experiences in promoting the LDP among the public. Mr. Kono is a true friend of Taiwan. He has spoken up for Taiwan on several occasions. When serving as a foreign minister, he voiced support for Taiwan's bid to attend the World Health Assembly. In December 2021, he said that Japan should work with the allies to send a signal to China that it would pay a high price if it tries to take over Taiwan by force, echoing remarks by the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Taiwan's emergency is an emergency for Japan. After Russia invaded Ukraine this year, Mr. Kono attended that the Western world must further increase sanctions against Russia, since China may otherwise be encouraged to engage in military adventurism regarding Taiwan. During Mr. Kono's tenure as a minister in charge of COVID-19 vaccine rollout, Japan donated 4.2 million vaccines to Taiwan, more than any other country did. In return, Taiwan donated anti-pandemic supplies to Japan, creating a good cycle. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the forum's opening keynote speaker, the Honorable Kono Taro. After Mr. Kono's speaking, the floor will be open for a Q&A section. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Do you hear me well? I hope. Well, I am very honored to be invited to this prestigious occasion, but unfortunately, I was struck by COVID and down with a high fever and low oxygen. Well, I'm now recovered, but my doctor would not let me travel overseas. So my apologies for my online appearance today. I am now sitting in my office in LDP headquarters in Tokyo. Well, today, let me talk about the security situation in the region, which concerns both Japan and Taiwan. The year 2021 marked the 70th anniversary of the signing of the Security Treaty between Japan and the United States. As we celebrated this milestone in our long-standing friendship, the two nations reaffirmed that the Japan-US alliance is the cornerstone of peace and stability in Asia, and that our alliance is stronger, broader, and more essential today than ever. Established between two liberal democracies, the Japan-US alliance has achieved remarkable progress over the past 70 years through shared strategic interest and unwavering commitment to common values such as liberty, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. Under the US-Japan Security Treaty, the United States provides for Japan's security, including extended deterrence or the nuclear umbrella, while Japan provides bases and other military installations for the US forces on the Japanese territory. The treaty brought about the peace and stability not only to Japan, but also to the Asia-Pacific region. The Japan-US alliance has served as basis for cooperation in areas beyond defense, It has developed cooperation in political and economic areas as stipulated in the preamble and Article 2 of the Security Treaty. Under a free and open international order established after World War II, Japan, with the alliance with the United States based on common values, was able to achieve great success. In 2015, the Abe government enacted the peace and security legislation, which has enabled the self-defense force to defend the U.S. forces against an armed attack from aggressors when legal requirements are met. Since 2017, based on this legislation, the self-defense force has guarded U.S. military aircraft and vessels during requested occasions, such as bilateral exercises. Also, in 2015, the two governments undertook a major revision of the defense guidelines, reflecting new development in the military technology and new security threats of the 21st century. The new defense guidelines not only significantly expanded the scope of bilateral cooperation in existing maritime, air, and ground domains, but also added for the first time bilateral cooperation in strategically critical domains, such as the cyberspace and outer space. As Putin invaded Ukraine, however, the international order, as we have known for some decades, have changed drastically. I was informed of the massing of the Russian soldiers near the Ukrainian border, but I never thought something like this would happen in this century. Whatever Putin and the Russian government say about this atrocity in Ukraine, we all know that Putin is 100% responsible for the deaths and the sufferings of the Ukrainian people and the destruction of their land. There are no excuses for Putin. We need to stand united behind Ukraine against this brutal aggressor. If the global community let Putin go unpunished, it would send the wrong signal to dictatorships. They may think they can also get away unscathed and repeat such an atrocity. Then every country and everyone can become a victim. By invading Ukraine and threatening with nuclear weapons, Putin might have opened a new era of naked power play. Putin is threatening the global community with the use of nuclear weapons. Of course, we cannot accept the use or threat of nuclear weapons. Even so-called small tactical nuclear weapons of today would bring about a tragedy much, much worse than Hiroshima or Nagasaki. But Putin is trying to open Pandora's box. We can never allow him to do so. Once a nuclear weapon is used, every state would want to have deterrence capability with their own nuclear weapons, and it would end the NPT regime. The Japanese government and the people of Japan are taking Putin's atrocity very seriously because we believe this will have very significant implications for the peace and security of Asia. How the international community reacts to Putin and how strongly we can unite behind Ukraine and sanction the Russian economy will become important message to those leaders in the region who do not hide their intentions to unilaterally change the status quo by force. During the Cold War, the United States provided security for Japan. The Soviet forces were to be taken care of, by the United States. The economies of the Western world were growing fast and strong, whereas the Soviet and its satellite economies were isolated and lagging behind. So the West was able to contain the Soviet and its satellite countries. Now it is quite different. The biggest variable of the security in the region is China. The Chinese economy today is much stronger and more integrated with the global economy than the Soviet economy in the Cold War era. The Chinese Communist Party is aiming at building a strong military to realize its China dream. Although China claims that its military expansion is defensive, it is not only building up its military power, but also trying to expand its sphere of influence. The Chinese military spending started to drastically increase from around 1989, and it has increased 42-fold in 30 years. It even more than doubled in the last 10 years. Until 1991, China had no modern submarines nor fighter jets. But as the Chinese economy grew, CCP invested heavily in modern warfare. Now China has 52 modern submarines against Japan's 22, and has nearly 1,200 fourth and fifth generation fighter jets against 300 for our air self-defense force. China has been sending its Coast Guard vessels into the Japanese territorial waters surrounding the Senkaku Island in the East China Sea almost every month since 2012. The self-defense force fighter jets had to scramble against the Chinese Air Force 698 times over the East China Sea in 2021. That is almost 2 scrambles in a day. And it has been continuing while both Japan and China are fighting against the COVID-19. China is also trying to change the status quo in the South China Sea. China has already militarized Paracel and Spratly Islands with construction of guns and batteries, 3,000-meter-long runways, harbors, and radar facilities on them. Such actions by China are nothing less than assertive and coercive attempts to overturn international norms and undermine the rule-based international order. A free and open South China Sea is of crucial importance for both global security and commerce. Should the international community overlook China's continued attempts to undermine international laws and alter the status quo in these waters, their devastating consequences would not only be limited to the Indo-Pacific region, but would reach across the world. The global community must strongly oppose these actions and make the aggressor pay a high cost for them. And the possibility of the Chinese use of forces against Taiwan is now said to be rising. How the United States, together with like-minded countries, could defend Taiwan from Chinese aggression is the question we need to answer now. If China uses forces against Taiwan, whether we choose or not, Japan will be affected. So now Japan needs to show our resolve to act with the global community to defend liberty and democracy. In a scenario presented by military analysts, Japan's self-defense force would provide defense for the U.S. forces from attacks of Chinese ships and aircrafts. As the scenario goes, China may try to appeal that it would not attack Japan unless it provides support for the U.S. forces. But if Japan did not do so, the Japan-U.S. alliance would fall apart. But if China attacks the U.S. forces in Japan and the self-defense forces with some Chinese missiles and its naval and air powers in case of the Taiwan invasion, or some attempts to unilaterally change the status quo in the East and South China Sea, the Japan-U.S. response must be different. Some analysts say that self-defense force, together with U.S. forces in Japan, need to attack command and control centers and radar sites to disable the missiles and runways of their bases to prevent further air attacks. With this in mind, those analysts say that Tokyo may need to discuss possible missile deployment with Washington. Should Tokyo deploy their own intermediate-range ballistic missiles, or should Tokyo let the U.S. forces bring in the U.S. missiles to their bases in Japan? If the U.S. forces are to deploy their missiles in Japan, should the Japanese government also put its finger on the trigger, or should it have a veto? Our aim is not solely to expand our military capability. Even if we spend more money on arms, it is not easy to stop the Chinese military expansion. But if the United States and its allies could show determination, it will send a strong message to Beijing. Our goal is to show the resolve of our alliance to defend and protect our common values, such as liberty, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, and to make China realize that a coercive annexation of Taiwan cannot be achieved within their acceptable cost and time frame. That is why we consider what is happening in Ukraine is not just a European affair, but it is related to the security of the Indo-Pacific. We also need to note that we may be entering an era of economic warfare. Instead of physically fighting to destroy the enemy forces, using economic sanctions to destroy the enemy economy. Ukraine has asked NATO to establish a no-fly zone, but NATO, afraid of a direct conflict with Russia, declined it. Of course, Ukraine is not a member of NATO, and NATO has no treaty obligation to defend Ukraine. But it is true that even the powerful United States, together with the European nations, is not able to go to war against Russia to defend the democracy, even though Putin is 100% responsible. Some dictators are now in position of huge destructive power with missiles and nuclear weapons, and could attack civilians and destroy cities and economic activities quite easily. Tolerance to casualties and sufferings in the war has become so low in democratic countries. Democratic leaders can be vulnerable to domestic criticism, but dictators could suppress those voices. Thus, it may be preferable for democratic governments to resort to economic sanctions. If so, like-minded countries need to be prepared for economic warfare. On the other hand, dictatorship could also wage economic warfare. Beijing is using China's imports and exports as leverage to influence other countries. For example, 90% of Taiwan pineapple were exported to China in 2020, but import of fruit from Taiwan was suddenly banned in 2021. 63% of Taiwan pineapples ended up in the Japanese market at cheaper prices in that year. China also cut off import of Norwegian salmon, Filipino bananas, and Australian iron ore, and export of rare earths to Japan when these countries angered Beijing. We need to build resilient supply chains of food, energy, and other strategic products, not depending on possible aggressors. It may divide the global economy into blocks and reduce the possible economic returns, but that is the cost of our security. We also need to look at the United Nations. In the face of the atrocity in Ukraine, the United Nations was polarized as Putin's Russia has a seat in the Security Council with a veto. It may be the time that we move on to create a UN 2.0. As long as dictators have a seat in the Security Council with a veto, we cannot take actions against aggressions by dictators. The United Nations may continue to function as a talking forum, but we need a system in which the global community could take collective actions, such as establishing a global peacekeeping operation. They say it is even difficult to amend the UN Charter with the existing Security Council composition. Well, we need to learn from history. The United States, more than 200 years ago, could not amend its original constitution, the Articles of Confederation, because it was so rigid. So instead of amending it, they adopted a new United States Constitution and superseded the old Constitution. The global community could adopt a new UN Charter 2.0, superseding the existing one, and move on to the United Nations 2.0, in which no countries have a veto. Japan and Taiwan also need to work together beyond security. The climate crisis requires everyone and every government to act. Japan was once the global leader in the field of solar and wind power, but the wrong government policies led the industry to decline. There are no longer any competitive manufacturers of photovoltaic or wind turbines in Japan, when finally the government put emphasis on those technologies. It is quite unfortunate. One day, we might be able to connect all the power grids across the borders in Asia. We could share the electricity from wind in Mongolia to water from Himalaya, from solar in Saudi Arabia to geothermal in Japan. As the European integration started with coal and steel, the first step towards a broader integration in Asia may start with a grid. Surely it would enhance mutual trust and interdependence. Unlike Europe, where peoples have common Christian backgrounds and fairly similar cultures, we have differences in many ways in Asia. But let us work together to make the 21st century truly the century of Asia. Thank you very much. And I'm very much looking forward to visiting Taiwan soon. Thank you very much.
All right, many thanks to Kono Taro-san's valuable speech. And please stay online for our further Q&A session. And now let's invite Deputy Minister Tien once again for moderating this Q&A.
Honorable Kono-san, it's such inspiring and comprehensive remarks you just made. I can understand your vision. You have a great vision. You touched almost everything now happening in the world. Particularly, you gave some warnings to the world. You mentioned that Pandora's box, nuclear warfare that will be devastating. And you talk about United Nations 2.0. And you talk about new energy. You talk about economic consequences of this Russian invading Ukraine. You talk about the regional security. And one thing I admire the most is you talk about Taiwan and Japan relations. I have to echo to you, aside from that, Indo-Pacific, I understand, was initiated by the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. When he met with Modi 2016, he mentioned a free and open Indo-Pacific. And that connected the United States, Australia, and Japan, and India. It laid a very sound foundation for the regional as well as the world security mechanism. I think not only me appreciate your talk just now, I think everybody on this site as well as the people online also being inspired. I'm sure there are so many questions or comments they would like to make. Now I think the floor is open. We don't have too much time, so everyone, if you have questions, best state your name and who you represent and make the question short and sweet. Thank you. Anyone? I think the president of Prospect Foundation, Lai Yizhong, has something to comment or ask.
Yeah, thank you, Minister Kono, and really like to see you here, although that you are there, so wish you a speedy recovery. My name is Yichong, I'm president of Prospect Foundation. I'm supposed to welcome you here in person, but here I'd like to ask you a question in remote mode. We agree basically everything that what you said in your speech, which goes to a great detail regarding how not just about the threat, but also the solution that you want to provide, including United Nations reform, in which Taiwan is very interested in, and we also wanted to be able to obtain a seat at the table. But on the other hand, there is another thing about the energy security you mentioned, which is also very innovative and probably could serve as a solution for the regional issues. But here I'd like to ask about the development that 3 years ago the President Tsai asked how Taiwan and Japan, we could develop a security dialogue to strengthen the security cooperation between those two countries. As you mentioned, that the security threat to Taiwan is also a threat to Japan, and vice versa, especially the passing of the former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo. In Taiwan, we also developed the issue that if something happened in Japan, something that also happened in Taiwan. So that also brings the urgency about the strengthening and especially establishing the kind of security mechanism that we want to establish. And 3 years ago, advocated by President Tsai. And is there anything that we can actually do to make this realized? So that both Taiwan and Japan, I believe also we could establish on the foundation set up by the former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lai. Minister Kono, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, East Asia is a very unstable situation right now. And unfortunately, in this region, we have no mechanism like NATO in Europe. So I've been talking to my friends in Europe and the United States. Well, why don't you expand the NATO, not only to the Atlantic, but Pacific as well. Make NATO into a NATO or something. But maybe we can expand AUKUS and let us in and make it JOCUS. We need some kind of mechanism among the like-minded countries in Asia so that we can defend our common values, such as democracy or rule of law or liberty and all those things. So we have been setting up Quad. There's AUKUS. There's some other mechanism. We'll probably need to create some kind of security arrangement. Plus, we need to build regional mechanisms such as TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership. Former President Obama convinced Mr. Abe that we need some kind of regional mechanism, not just for trade, but for investment, labor, environment, whatnot. So Prime Minister Abe decided to bring Japan into TPP. And as we are signing, the United States left TPP. It was quite unfortunate. We are hoping that Taiwan would join TPP. It is a very good regional mechanism. And Taiwan should be part of it. And hopefully, one day, not in the distant future, the United States would realize the importance of it, and it will come back.
Thank you. I think there can be a starting point like a Quad plus. Maybe would be a starting point to talk about the regional security. Anyhow, Quad covers a large area in Asia. If we can have a Quad plus, I think we probably can give some directions. And of course, CPTPP is very, very important. And we submitted, and we are working very hard trying to get it as soon as possible. And I want to take this opportunity to thank for Japan for your support. And I know everyone in Japan, they want Taiwan to be admitted as soon as possible. I hope Mr. Kono-san can push forward in Japan. Thank you. And some other questions, please? Yes, the lady on the back. Oh, the gentleman, sorry. Right there.
Thanks very much for that really interesting speech, Minister Kono. I'm Will Glasgow from the Australian newspaper. I wanted to ask you about something that's been in the news a lot, the proposed trip or reported trip by US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Some people say that if the trip had happened in April, that would have been okay. And people say, including President Biden, they're concerned about the timing of the trip if it was to happen next week. President Biden said the US military is concerned. You said at the end of your speech you're really looking forward to visiting Taiwan. I wonder your thoughts as someone who has to think about the consequences of a visit. What do you think about this proposed trip? Would you like it to go ahead? Just tell us what you think.
I don't have a particular opinion about anyone in any parliament traveling to anybody. It's totally up to them. And if Speaker Pelosi would like to come to Asia, I think it's our freedom to do so.
Thank you. Any more questions? Yes, please. Over there. It's a long distance. You probably have to run a little bit.
The microphone is
now
in my hand. Minister Kono, nice to see you again. Christopher Pyne, former Australian Defence Minister. I think the last time we saw each other in person was a 2+2 in Sydney, the end of 2018, with Maurice Payne and Takeshi Iwaya was the Defence Minister, I think, in Japan at the time. In the absence of other questions, I thought I should ask you a question about your comments to do with NATO in Asia. I note in the recent NATO meeting where Taiwan was present, for the first time NATO decided to, in their communique, indicate that China was a strategic threat to NATO and to their interests in Europe. And I wanted to know what you thought that meant practically in the Indo-Pacific and how we might be able to take advantage of that statement by the NATO countries.
Thank you. Well, it is true that China is trying to change the status quo, and oftentimes with force. And countries like Japan, Australia, US, Europe, Canada, and other like-minded countries, I think we need to preserve our common values. And in order to do so, I think we need to get together. Well, of course, there's a Ukraine issue in Europe, but in Asia, there's a Chinese military expansion, which is also very, very threatening. So we need some kind of mechanism globally for the like-minded country to work together to secure our common values. And well, either we could set up similar organization in Asia, or if there's an existing organization, we can simply expand that to Indo-Pacific region. As for Taiwan, Taiwan plays a very key role as provider of semiconductor technology and products. So it directly affects the countries in NATO as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if NATO would start talking about the global issue as their own issue soon. So Japan, Australia, Republic of Korea, and other countries, we will definitely need to work with NATO for Asian issue, which is now becoming a global issue as well. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much. I think the time is running out. I want to thank each and every one. Particularly, I want to thank Kono-san. I see you fully recovered. So whenever you think you want to visit Taiwan, please do so. Let us know. We will be more than happy to see you here in Taiwan. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Now we have concluded.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks to Kono-san for the responses as well, and also thanks to Deputy Minister Tian. Please be seated. Now we would like to take a short break now, and our next session will begin at 10:30. So please be back before 10:30 so we can promptly start next agenda. Also, there are some refreshment and beverage out of this hall, so please feel free to enjoy it while social networking. Thank you and see you soon.